Thank you. I want to follow up now to Governor Huntsman. From the Erie Canal to the internet, innovation is what's always fueled economic recovery. So shouldn't the focus now be on trying to create the innovative jobs of tomorrow? And what do you think those are?
We need to regain our industrial base. I would first and foremost disagree with Rick on one measure. That is, Pennsylvania is not the gas capital of the country. Washington, D.C. is a gas capital of the country. There are two things that critically need to be done for us to stay ahead in this highly competitive world. And when we lose one or both of them, we lose out to the Chinese and the Indians. One is maintaining a strong commitment to innovation, entrepreneurship, and freedom in the marketplace. We have the sense of innovation that no country has been able to replicate. Some have tried, and some will continue to try, but nobody does it like we do here. And that gives rise to high technology, to regular manufacturing jobs across the board. It makes this economy hum when it's working well. The second part of it is you need a marketplace, like Rick described a moment ago, in which you can translate those innovations into products. We are losing our ability to maintain a competitive marketplace today. All right. That's taxes, that's regulation. We've lost it to others. So right now we're not able to translate innovation to the market. We've got to regain the magic of a strong marketplace so that we have the complete package. Karen.
Congressman Gingrich, Speaker Gingrich, Medicare is going broke. Consider the fact that half of all Medicare spending is done in the last 2 years of life. And research that has been done right here at Dartmouth by the Dartmouth Atlas would suggest that much of this money is going to treatments and interventions that do nothing to prolong life or to improve it. In fact, some of it does the opposite. Do you consider this wasteful spending? And if so, should the government do anything about it?
You know, I'm really glad you asked that, because I was just swapping emails today with Andy von Eschenbach, who was the head of the National Cancer Institute, the head of the Food and Drug Administration. But before that, he was the provost at MD Anderson, the largest cancer treatment center in the world. And he wrote me to point out that the most recent U.S. government intervention on whether or not to have prostate testing is basically going to kill people. So if you ask me, do I want some Washington bureaucrat to create a class action decision which affects every American's last 2 years of life? Not ever. I think it is a disaster. I think, candidly, Governor Palin got attacked unfairly for describing what would, in effect, be death panels. And what von Eschenbach will tell you if you call him is the decision to suggest that we not test men with PSA will mean that a number of people who do not have who are susceptible to a very rapid prostate cancer will die unnecessarily, and there was not a single urologist, not a single specialist on the board that looked at it. So I'm opposed to class intervention for these things.
Well, Congresswoman Bachmann, of course, no one wants the government to come between a doctor and a patient. But do you think that Americans are getting the most for their money in Medicare spending? And how can we make sure that the money that is being spent on the treatments and the preventive treatments that do the most?
We have a big problem today when it comes to Medicare, because we know that 9 years from now, the Medicare Hospital Part B Trust Fund is going to be dead flat broke. So we've got to deal with this issue. I was in the White House with President Obama this summer. We asked him not once, but 3 times, President Obama, what is your plan to save Medicare? And the president mumbled, and he didn't give an answer the first time, the second time. And the third time, the president said something very interesting, Karen. He said Obamacare. I think that senior citizens across the country have no idea that President Obama plans for Medicare to collapse, and instead everyone will be pushed into Obamacare. And just like Newt Gingrich said, the way that Obamacare runs, there's a board called IPAB It's made up of 15 political appointees. These 15 political appointees will make all the major health care decisions for over 300 million Americans. I don't want 15 political appointees to make a health care decision for a beautiful, fragile 85-year-old woman who should be making her own decision.
We'll come back to Medicare as well and medical issues and then the cost of Medicare in the United States. I want to talk about advisors and appointees. Tell me, Governor Huntsman, whose advice do you seek on economic issues, and what's the profile of the kind of person you'd like to have advising you in your White House?
I'd like the profile of my own father, who's a great entrepreneur. And he started with nothing, and he built a great business. And my brother now runs that business. People who have been out in the world, who have actually had their hands on products and manufacturing and know something about how to build something from the ground up. That's what this country has always done. It's what we need to continue to do. But in order to have the right policies in place, and some I've put forward as governor of the great state of Utah, tax reform. I created a flat tax in the state of Utah. It took that state to the #1 position in terms of job creation, regulatory reform, and energy independence. I want the kind of people who understand what makes an economy work. But let's be real about what it takes to get into federal government service these days. Who on earth from the private sector is ever going to want to give up their privacy and enter government service with the background checks, the financial disclosures, and everything else that serve as tremendous disincentives for good people to get into government? So what we have today, Charlie, we've got a professional governing class of people on one end, and then you've got private sector.
And so what would you do about that to change that, to attract those kind of people so that they would be willing to serve a cross-section of people from every
Let's get back to
gender.
what we did a generation or two ago when we were more open in terms of accommodating people from all backgrounds who wanted to take a little bit of their life and serve in government and then leave and go back to what it is they did best, whether on the farm or whether insurance or whether business or whether academia.
When you mention a flat tax, does that mean that you look with some favor upon 999 that Herman Cain mentioned at the beginning of this conversation?
I think it's a catchy phrase. In fact, I thought it was the price of a pizza when I first heard about it.
Price of a pizza.
But here's what we need. We need something that's doable. And what I have put forward is a tax program that is doable. It actually wipes clean all of the loopholes and the deductions. This is right out of what the Simpson-Bowles Commission recommended, a bipartisan group of people that took a thoughtful approach to tax reform.
Corporate and individual.
Individual, and on the corporate side, phase out all of the corporate welfare, all of the subsidies, because we can't afford it any longer, in a revenue-neutral fashion, buy down the rate from 35% to 25%, leveling the playing field for businesses big and small, allowing us to be a whole lot more competitive in the second decade of the 21st century.
Juliana.
Thank you. We will be coming back to 999, but first...
No, wait.
Well,
he mentioned me.
Give him 30 seconds.
He mentioned me, and you didn't give me an opportunity to respond.
You have that opportunity now.
Thank you very much. 999 will pass, and it is not the price of a pizza because it has been well studied and well developed. It starts with, unlike your proposals, throwing out the current tax code. Continuing to pivot off the current tax code is not going to boost this economy. This is why we developed 999. 9% corporate business flat tax, 9% personal income flat tax, and a 9% national sales tax. And it will pass, Senator, because the American people want it to pass.
This is beginning to sound more like my table. Juliana. Karen.
So, Mr. Cain, who do you turn to for political advice and for economic advice?
My advisors come from the American people. Now, I will have some experts. One of my experts that helped me to develop this is a gentleman by the name of Rich Lowry out of Cleveland, Ohio. He is an economist, and he has worked in the business of wealth creation most of his career. I also have a number of other well-recognized economists that helped me to develop this 999 plan. It didn't come off a pizza box. No, it was well-studied and well-developed because it will replace the corporate income tax, the personal income tax, the capital gains tax, the death tax, and most importantly, the payroll tax.
So who are some of these economists?
Rich Lowry out of Cleveland, Texas, is one of the economists that I have used. He's been my lead economist on helping to develop this.
Juliana.
Thank you. Governor Romney, it's 2013, and the European debt crisis has worsened. Countries are defaulting. Europe's largest banks are on the verge of bankruptcy. contagion has spread to the U.S., and the global financial system is on the brink. What would you do differently than what President Bush, Henry Paulson, and Ben Bernanke did in 2008?
Well, you're talking about a scenario that's obviously very difficult to imagine, but
it's not a hypothetical because more than half the
I'm afraid it is a hypothetical.
It's not, Governor, it's
you
not
want to explain why it's not a hypothetical?
Yes,
okay.
Because more than half the country believes that a financial meltdown is likely in the next several years, and the U.S. banks have at least $700 billion in exposure to Europe. So it's a very real threat, and voters want to know what you would do differently.
It's still a hypothetical as to what's going to precisely happen in the future. I'm not very good at being omniscient, but I can tell you this, that I'm not going to have to call up Timothy Geithner and say, how does the economy work? Because I spent my life in the economy. I spent my entire career working in the private sector, starting businesses, helping turn around businesses, sometimes successfully and sometimes not. And I know how to make tough decisions and to gather the input of people from around the country to help make the important decisions that have to be made. Clearly, if you think the entire financial system is going to collapse, you take action to keep that from happening. In the case of Europe right now, they're looking at what's happening with Greece. Are they going to default on their debt? Are they not? That's a decision which I would like to have input on if I were President of the United States and try and prevent the kind of contagion that would affect the U.S. banking system and put us at risk. But I can tell you this. I'm not interested in bailing out individual institutions that have wealthy people that want to make sure that their shares are worth something. I am interested in making sure that we preserve our financial system, our currency, the banks across the entire country, and I will always put the interest of the American people ahead of the interests of any institution.
So would you or would you not be open to another Wall Street bailout?
Well, no one likes the idea of a Wall Street bailout. I certainly don't.
But you said in 2008 that it prevented the collapse of the financial
system. There's no question but that the action that President Bush and that Secretary Paulson took was designed to keep not just a collapse of individual banking institutions, but to keep the entire currency of the country worth something and to keep all the banks from closing and to make sure we didn't all lose our jobs. My experience tells me that we were on the precipice and we could have had a complete meltdown of our entire financial system, wiping out all the savings of the American people. So action had to be taken. Was it perfect? No. Was it well implemented? No, not particularly. Were there some institutions that should not have been bailed out? Absolutely. Should they have used the funds to bail out General Motors and Chrysler? No, that was the wrong source for that funding. But this approach of saying, look, we're going to have to preserve our currency and maintain America and our financial system is essential.
So you agree with Speaker Gingrich about Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Fed?
I wouldn't keep Ben Bernanke in office. I'd choose someone of my own
and who might
interest.
That be?
Well, I haven't chosen that person. I haven't even chosen the vice president. I'm not sure I'm the nominee yet.
Well, we'd like to have, nor is anyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
But we'd like to have an idea of the kind of people, that you would have confidence in playing this very important role, although Congressman Paul may differ about how important it is.
Well, I wish we could find Milton Friedman again. Although what Milton said to us was, he said, if you took all the economists in America and you laid them end to end, it would be a good thing. And I have more respect for economists than that. The people who help guide my economic policy are Greg Mankiw at Harvard and Glenn Hutchins at Columbia. They were both former chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors. I don't always agree with them. I also talk to a number of business leaders. I talk to people who are currently in the economy, in the financial sector, and in the manufacturing sector. And on the basis of these various viewpoints, I make my decisions. And I believe that drawing on the best minds in this country, including economists, is something that's essential to make sure that we preserve our financial system. Right now, America's in crisis. We don't need to think about a hypothetical of what happens if Europe explodes and pulls us under. Although, if that does happen, you want to have someone who's smart, who has experience, who knows how the financial services sector works, who knows how to protect American jobs, and I do. I've done it.
And as far as you're concerned, there's no institution, no financial institution that's too big to fail.
Well, no, you don't want to bail out anybody. The idea of trying to bail out an institution to protect the shareholders or to protect certain interest group, that's a terrible idea. And that shouldn't happen. You do want to make sure that we don't lose the country, and we don't lose our financial system, and we don't lose American jobs, and that all the banks don't go under. So you have to take action very carefully to make sure that you preserve our currency and preserve our financial system. But bailouts of individual institutions, no one has interest in that, I don't think.